Here's a number that should make you uncomfortable. The average American will earn somewhere between $1.2 and $1.8 million over their working lifetime. That's not a typo. Over the course of a 40-year career, even someone earning a modest salary will see more than $1 million flow through their hands. And yet, the median liquid savings for Americans at age 30 sits at around $7,000. $7,000 after years of work, while more than $1 million has technically passed through their accounts. That gap between what we earn and what we keep is the most expensive math problem most people will ever fail to solve. My name is Tom, and I spend way too much time thinking about why intelligent, hardworking people end up with nothing to show for decades of effort. If you've ever looked at your bank account and wondered where the money went, or felt like you're constantly running on a financial treadmill that goes nowhere, stick around. Today we're going to break down the brutal arithmetic behind the first $100,000, why roughly 75% of people never reach this milestone in liquid invested wealth, and why crossing this specific threshold fundamentally changes the math of everything that comes after. Let me start with the calculation that changed how I think about wealth building forever. Imagine you decide to invest $500 every single month, which is $6,000 per year. That's a meaningful chunk of income for most people, but it's also not impossible for a working adult who's willing to get intentional about their spending. Assuming your investments earn an average return of 8% annually, which is actually conservative compared to historical stock market performance, here's the part that feels almost unfair. It takes approximately 12 years of consistent monthly contributions to reach your first $100,000. 12 years. That's 144 months of discipline. That's watching your friends upgrade their apartments and buy new cars, while you're quietly stacking away money that seems to be growing at a pace you can barely perceive. During those first 12 years, most of the money in your account comes directly from your own contributions. You're doing the heavy lifting, while compound interest is still warming up. Out of that $100,000, roughly $84,000 comes from what you actually put in. The remaining $16,000 represents investment returns. Not exactly life-changing growth, right? This is where most people look at the math and quit. They get discouraged because the returns don't seem impressive enough compared to the sacrifice they're making. They feel like they're running a marathon and only moving forward 1 inch at a time. But here's what they don't realize. And this is the part that will fundamentally change how you think about money. That person who pushed through and hit $100,000 just completed the hardest part of the entire wealth-building journey. They've built a foundation that's about to start working harder for them than they ever worked for their money. From that point forward, the mathematics shift dramatically in their favor. The next milestone is $200,000. And here's the part that should make you want to call everyone you know. It only takes about 6 more years to double that $100,000. Let me say that again because it matters. It took 12 years to go from $0 to $100,000, but only 6 additional years to double that amount. By year 18, you're sitting at $200,000, and even though you've only reached $200,000, you're actually more than halfway to becoming a millionaire. Not 20% of the way there, more than halfway. The math stops being linear and starts being exponential. And that exponential curve is working in your favor instead of against you. So, why do 75% of people never experience this? Why do intelligent adults who earn more than $1 million over their lifetimes end up with less than $7,000 in liquid savings by age 30? The answer isn't complicated, but it is uncomfortable. It comes down to 4 specific traps that silently drain wealth from people who don't even realize they're caught. The first trap is lifestyle creep, and it's the most invisible wealth destroyer in existence. Here's how it typically works. You get your first real job out of college, making $45,000 a year. You're living in a studio apartment, eating cheap, driving an older car, and you feel broke, but manageable. Then you get a promotion or switch jobs and suddenly you're making $60,000. That $15,000 raise should be life-changing, right? It should accelerate your savings dramatically. Except, here's what actually happens for most people. Every dollar of that $15,000 raise gets absorbed into a slightly nicer apartment, a car payment, better restaurants, a gym membership that gets used twice, and subscriptions that auto-renew without anyone noticing. A year later, you're making $60,000, and you somehow feel exactly as broke as you did at $45,000. The math here is brutal. If you were saving 10% of $45,000, that's $4,500 a year going into investments. Bump up to $60,000 and keep that same 10% rate, you should now be saving $6,000. Except you don't, because the new apartment costs an extra $600 a month. The car payment is $400. You're eating out 3 times a week instead of once. Your actual savings rate drops to maybe 5%, and suddenly you're saving less than you were before the raise. You got promoted and went backwards financially. This happens to almost everyone, and most people never even notice it's happening because each individual upgrade feels reasonable and deserved. The second trap is what I call payments mentality, and it's perhaps the most psychologically damaging financial framework that exists in modern society. Walk into any car dealership and ask how much a car costs. They won't tell you $35,000. They'll tell you it's only $499 a month. Only. As if that word makes it affordable. Financing has completely rewired how people think about cost. Instead of asking the real question, which is, can I actually afford this thing? People have been trained to ask, can I afford this monthly payment? And the answer is almost always yes, because dealerships and credit card companies have gotten extremely good at making the math feel small while the total cost remains enormous. This is the mental model that keeps people broke forever. When you think in payments, everything becomes affordable. A $50,000 truck is just $750 a month. A $2,000 couch is just $89 a month with that 0% financing for 24 months. A vacation you can't afford is just $200 a month on the credit card. Before you know it, you have $3,000 in monthly payments for things that are either depreciating in value or already consumed, and you haven't saved a single dollar toward actual wealth. You're renting your lifestyle from lenders who are getting wealthy while you stay stuck. And here's the part that makes this trap particularly insidious. The companies profiting from payment thinking have optimized their entire pitch around making monthly commitments feel manageable. They stretch loans to 7 or 8 years to get that monthly number down. They offer 0% promotional periods, knowing most people won't pay off the balance before the interest kicks in. They use words like affordable and accessible and build your credit as if debt is a favor they're doing for you instead of a product they're selling at enormous profit margins. Every marketing message you encounter is designed to short-circuit your natural resistance to spending money you don't have. Consider this calculation that should keep you awake at night. If you finance a $25,000 car at 6% interest over 5 years, your monthly payment is about $483. Over those 5 years, you'll pay almost $29,000 for a car that's worth maybe $15,000 when you're done making payments. But here's the part that really matters. If instead of making those car payments, you invested that same $483 every month in a basic index fund earning 7% annually, after 5 years, you'd have over $34,000. That's the opportunity cost of lifestyle debt. It's not just the money you spend. It's all the money that money could have made if you'd invested it instead. The third trap is the looking rich versus being wealthy confusion, and this might be the most socially reinforced wealth destroyer of all. We live in a culture that constantly broadcasts consumption as success. Every advertisement, every social media post, every neighbor's driveway is showing you what success supposedly looks like. It looks like a new car. It looks like designer clothes. It looks like expensive vacations posted to Instagram. And so people spend money they don't have to buy, things they don't need to impress people they don't even like. Here's the part that nobody talks about. The people who look the most wealthy often aren't. They're the ones financing everything, maxing out credit cards, and lying awake at 3 a.m. doing math in their heads trying to figure out how to make their next payment. Meanwhile, the people who are actually building wealth look pretty unremarkable. They're driving paid-off cars that are a few years old. They're living in reasonable houses they can actually afford. They're not posting their net worth to social media because they don't need external validation for financial decisions that they know are correct. There's a fundamental difference between having money and being wealthy, and most people confuse the two. Having money means you can buy nice things right now. Being wealthy means your money generates more money, which eventually buys you freedom instead of objects. The person financing the luxury car has money flowing through their hands. The person investing that same money into index funds is actually building wealth. One of them looks successful, the other one becomes successful. The cruelest part of this trap is how it compounds over time. The person who spent their 20s looking successful arrives at their 40s with nothing but receipts and regrets. They traded decades of potential compound growth for a series of consumer goods that are now in landfills. Meanwhile, the person who looked unremarkable in their 20s shows up at 45 with a portfolio that's generating more monthly passive income than most people earn working full-time jobs. Both people earned similar salaries. They just made radically different choices about what to do with those earnings. And there's a social component to this trap that makes it especially hard to escape. When everyone around you is upgrading their lifestyle with every raise, declining to participate feels like falling behind. When your coworkers drive new cars and you're still driving your 8-year-old Honda, it's tempting to feel like you're doing something wrong. Nobody can see your brokerage account balance. Everyone can see your car. So the social rewards flow toward the people who look wealthy, even as the financial rewards flow toward the people who are building actual wealth in ways nobody notices or applauds. The fourth trap is what I call the optimization paralysis, and this one catches the intelligent people who think they're being smart about money. These are the folks who spend months researching the perfect investment strategy. Should I buy this ETF or that one? Should I use a Roth IRA or traditional? What about real estate? What about individual stocks? What about cryptocurrency? They join online forums. They read books. They analyze expense ratios to the third decimal point. And the whole time, they have $1,700 in their savings account and they're financing a couch. Here's the uncomfortable truth. None of that research matters if you're not actually accumulating capital. The best investment strategy in the world is worthless if you have nothing to invest. You don't need to be a genius to build wealth. You need to be consistent. Pick a boring index fund, automate your contributions, increase them every time you get a raise. That's it. That's the whole strategy. The returns you get from perfecting your investment approach are nothing compared to the returns you get from simply increasing how much you invest. Someone who invests $400 a month in a mediocre fund will dramatically outperform someone who invests $100 a month in the perfect fund. It's not close. The amount you invest matters infinitely more than the precision of your investment choices, at least until you have significant capital. So stop optimizing and start accumulating. Here's another way to think about it. Imagine you're filling a bathtub. The water coming out of the faucet is your contribution rate. The drain at the bottom represents fees, taxes, and poor investment decisions. Most people spend all their time trying to plug the drain while barely opening the faucet. They obsess over minimizing expenses and finding optimal strategies while contributing the minimum possible amount. The wealthy do the opposite. They open the faucet as wide as it will go and accept that some water will escape through the drain. They'd rather capture 90% of a rushing river than 99% of a trickle. This is why I tell people to stop reading about investing and start actually investing. You can fine-tune your strategy later, once you have enough capital for the optimizations to matter. Right now, the single most important thing you can do is increase the gap between what you earn and what you spend, and funnel that entire gap into appreciating assets. The investment vehicle almost doesn't matter. What matters is that your money is working instead of sitting idle, or worse, flowing out of your account to pay for things that are losing value every day you own them. Now, let me show you why the $100,000 threshold specifically changes everything, because there's something almost magical that happens when you cross this line. Below $100,000, your portfolio feels abstract. The returns are small enough that they don't really register as meaningful. You might see your investments go up by a few $100s in a good month. And while that's nice, it doesn't fundamentally change how you experience your financial life. You're still doing all the work. You're still the one pushing the boulder up the hill every single month. But once you cross $100,000, something shifts. At 8% annual returns, $100,000 generates about $8,000 a year in growth without you lifting a finger. That's $667 a month appearing in your account while you sleep. Suddenly, your money isn't just sitting there anymore. It's working a part-time job. And as your balance grows, that part-time job becomes a full-time job, and eventually it becomes a team of employees, all working to make you wealthier. The psychological shift might be even more important than the mathematical one. Seeing a six-figure balance makes becoming a millionaire feel achievable instead of impossible. It changes your identity from someone who's trying to build wealth to someone who has wealth and is now growing it. That identity shift affects every financial decision you make from that point forward. You stop thinking in terms of what you can afford to spend and start thinking in terms of what your money can afford to earn. There's also something that happens to your stress response when you cross this threshold. Financial anxiety operates like background noise for most people. It's always there, humming at a low frequency, affecting decisions in ways you don't even consciously recognize. When you know you have $100,000 working for you, that noise starts to quiet down. Not because you're rich, but because you've built a cushion between yourself and financial catastrophe. Emergencies that would have destroyed you a few years ago become manageable setbacks. Opportunities that would have been impossible to pursue suddenly become viable. You stop making decisions from fear and start making them from a position of calculated strength. This is why I think of the first $100,000 as less of a financial milestone and more of a psychological one. The number on your account isn't what changes. Your entire relationship with money changes. You go from someone who's constantly reacting to financial circumstances to someone who's proactively shaping them. You go from hoping things work out to having a reasonable degree of confidence that they will, because you've built evidence that you can make smart financial decisions consistently over time. There's a concept in behavioral economics called the threshold effect, and it explains why certain milestones feel disproportionately significant. Crossing from $99,000 to $101,000 isn't mathematically different from going from $97,000 to $99,000. But psychologically, it's a completely different experience. You've crossed into six figures. You've proven to yourself that you can accumulate real capital. And that proof becomes the foundation for everything that comes next. Consider someone who starts investing $500 a month at age 25. By 37, they've hit $100,000. Not that impressive, right? But if they keep going at the same rate, here's what happens next. By 43, they hit $200,000. By 47, they hit $300,000. By 50, they cross $400,000. By 53, they're at $500,000. And by 58, they become millionaires. The total journey took 33 years, but the first $100,000 consumed more than a third of that time. Everything after accelerated because compound interest finally had enough principal to work with. Now compare that to someone who waits until 30 to start. Same $500 a month, same returns. They don't hit $100,000 until 42. They don't hit $200,000 until 48. They reach $1 million at 63 instead of 58. 5 years of delay at the beginning cost them 5 years of millionaire status at the end. That's not a coincidence. That's compound interest mathematics, punishing procrastination with ruthless precision. So, what does this actually mean for you? Sitting there wondering if you're on the right track or hopelessly behind? First, understand that the difficulty of the first $100,000 is a feature, not a bug. It's hard because you're building something from nothing. You're creating the foundation that will support everything else. The boulder you're pushing uphill right now is about to crest the peak and start rolling downhill on its own, but only if you don't give up before you reach the top. Second, ruthlessly eliminate the 4 traps. Guard against lifestyle creep by deciding in advance what percentage of every raise goes directly to investments before you ever see it in your checking account. A simple rule that works. Take half of every raise and increase your automatic investment contributions by that amount. If you get a $200 monthly raise, increase your investment by $100 and let your lifestyle expand by the other $100. This way, you still feel the benefit of earning more, but you're also accelerating your wealth building with every increase in income. Reject payments mentality by asking the real question about every purchase. Can I pay for this in full right now? And if not, do I actually need it? The moment you start thinking about purchases in terms of monthly payments, you've already lost. Train yourself to think in total costs instead. That $35,000 car isn't $500 a month. It's $35,000 plus whatever interest you'll pay, plus the opportunity cost of not investing that money, which over time could easily double the real cost of the vehicle. Stop trying to look rich and start actually being wealthy, even if nobody notices or gives you credit for it. This might be the hardest adjustment because it goes against every social instinct you have. You want people to think you're successful. You want validation for your hard work. But the validation that comes from appearing wealthy is hollow, and it actually delays the day when you become wealthy in a way that generates its own rewards. Real financial security doesn't need external validation. It validates itself every time you check your portfolio. And stop optimizing your investment strategy while neglecting your contribution rate. If you're spending more time researching ETFs than figuring out how to increase your savings rate, your priorities are backwards. The people who build real wealth aren't stock-picking geniuses. They're aggressive savers who put boring consistency ahead of clever strategies. Third, understand that the boring middle is where wealth is actually built. The financial media wants to talk about hot stocks and market timing and cryptocurrency and whatever the exciting thing is this month. None of that matters as much as the mundane discipline of putting money away consistently, month after month, year after year, while everyone around you is spending their raises on lifestyle upgrades. The boring middle isn't glamorous, but it's the only path that actually works for regular people. This is the part of wealth building that nobody warns you about. Most of the journey is invisible. There are no celebrations when your portfolio crosses $47,000 or $63,000. Your friends don't throw parties when you max out your retirement contributions for the year. The milestones between $0 and $100,000 are just numbers on a screen that don't translate into anything meaningful you can show the world, and that invisibility is exactly what makes people quit. They're doing the right thing and getting no feedback that confirms they're on track. But here's what experienced investors understand. The invisibility is actually protection. If everyone could see your wealth building, they'd have opinions about it. They'd question your choices. They'd create pressure to spend or invest differently. The fact that your portfolio exists quietly in the background, growing without anyone's attention or approval, is what allows the compound interest to work uninterrupted. You don't need validation from others. You need patience with yourself. I want to leave you with something that might feel uncomfortable but is absolutely true. The reason most people never hit $100,000 in invested wealth isn't because they don't earn enough money. It's because they've been convinced that wealth building is complicated, that they need to find the perfect strategy, that they deserve to enjoy their money now because life is short. None of that is wrong exactly, but all of it misses the point. You will earn more than $1 million over your lifetime. That's almost certainly true if you work for several decades. The only question is whether any of that million stays with you, or whether it all flows through your hands into someone else's pockets. The first $100,000 is the hardest because it forces you to answer that question honestly. It forces you to choose between looking successful and becoming successful. It forces you to sit in the discomfort of delayed gratification while everyone around you is upgrading their lives on borrowed money. But here's the thing that makes all of it worthwhile. Once you cross that threshold, you've proven something to yourself that can never be taken away. You've proven that you can delay gratification, stick to a plan through market volatility and social pressure, and prioritize your future self over your present desires. Those traits don't just build your first $100,000. They make everything after that almost inevitable. The math of your financial life is going to compound in one direction or another. Either your debt will compound against you, or your investments will compound for you. There's no standing still. The choice you make in the next few years about which side of that equation you end up on will determine whether you spend your later years with freedom and options or still trading your time for money and wondering where it all went. So here's my challenge to you. Pick a number you can invest every month, even if it feels small. Automate it so you never have to make the decision again. And then commit to increasing it by at least $25 every time you get a raise, a bonus, or any other windfall. Don't touch it for 12 years, regardless of what the market does. Don't get clever. Don't get distracted. Just let the math work. Because that boring, unsexy, invisible accumulation is exactly how ordinary people become millionaires. Not through lucky breaks or genius investments or timing the market perfectly. Through doing the simple thing consistently long enough for compound interest to actually matter. The first $100,000 is the hardest. But once you're on the other side of it, you'll understand why everyone who's ever gotten there says it was worth every month of patience and sacrifice. Your future self is counting on the decision you make today.